Good day to you. Much has been happening in our great but troubled nation. As I was examining the papers this morning, I was reminded of several things. Most recently, Trump yesterday finally and very publicly acknowledged that masks are a good idea. They weren't macho enough or intelligent enough for him earlier, but he appeared on the stage during a press conference without his medical experts. We don't need medical experts. All we need is Donald Trump. And he had a mask on his left shoulder. Now, this reminds us of a very sad thing. The first time, this was just a week ago, Donald Trump was committing to masks. He put on a Lone Ranger mask covering just his eyes, but his nose and his mouth were open, which left him vulnerable to contracting the coronavirus as well as infecting others. But at least he's on board. He has admitted things are going to get worse until they get better. And he's quite right about that. He persists in calling it the China virus, which perhaps in a global sense is reasonable. I think in the United States there's only one term for this virus, and that would be the Trump virus, given his incompetence in handling it and the fact we have far more deaths than anyone in the world. Next, we're looking at troops from the Department of Homeland Security. Federal troops are insinuating themselves into local communities, albeit troubled communities. And who knows, maybe they'll help at some point, but they are rather a secretive group right now, and they need to have better coordination with local and state authorities who are supposed to handle this. We don't really need federal troops, and if we do, it's supposed to be the National Guard rather than some people who so far have behaved like stormtroopers. Now, I'm not saying that all members of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, are stormtroopers, but we have had a lot of complaints along that line. Now, in regard to our president, just last week, his niece, Mary Trump, released a book about her nephew, the Donald. I read it in the first 48 hours it was out and wrote about it from the point of view of Trump's older and ill-fated brother, the father of Mary Trump. Let's review the Trump siblings. The oldest is Mary Ann, who's now about 83. She had a fine career as a district court judge, just a step down from the Supreme Court. And then Fred Jr. was next, the ill-fated Fred. More about him in a second. The third was a lady still alive named Elizabeth Trump, who was, well, you hear executive, a bank executive or an executive assistant. Anyway, she did pretty well in a bank. We know what child number 4, the second son, Donald Trump, has done. Then the youngest is a low-key fellow named Robert Trump, or Rob Trump, a socialite who worked in the Trump administration and or for the Trump management team. So he's in retirement in the Hudson River Valley, which is where Michael Douglas and his lovely wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, live. And in this book, Mary Trump, who is a clinical psychologist, basically psychoanalyzed Donald. I was much more interested. That's rather dry stuff. I was more interested in what he did. I like to let readers determine what certain kinds of behavior means. And Trump has, of course, denounced the book. Trump supporters have denounced it, and those who are against Trump have praised the book. Donald, it seems, has a very long history of ripping people off, including members of his own family. Fred Trump was Donald's older brother, who was born in 1938, making him 8 years older than Donald, didn't want to be in the family business. He loved flying. Now, Fred Trump Sr. and Donald thought it was horrible that he wanted to fly. They called that being a taxi driver in the air. That's not necessarily relevant. What is relevant, that poor Fred was beset by an organic problem that goes way beyond psychoanalysis. He was anxiety-ridden and an alcoholic. And anyway, he quit the Trump organization as a young man. A terrific job, because Fred Trump was quite a rich guy, far better businessman than Donald. The king of bankruptcies, 5 bankruptcies, and who Donald inherited a few $100 million in early 1990s or late 1990s currency. So it's an enormous amount of money. So he was lying, absolutely lying about this $1 million one-time loan. He got his money from his dad, and he benefited by the expertise of his dad. The Trump Tower, the Grand Hotel, whatever the name of the hotel was, in downtown Manhattan, would not have happened without the expertise and the money of Donald. And at any rate, Fred wanted out of all of this and became an airline pilot in his mid-20s. He had been in the Air Force Reserves, and he did so well that TWA, Trans World Airlines, which was one of the major carriers at the time, awarded him the very popular and important route between Boston and LAX, Los Angeles Airport, and then back. However, within a few months, TWA gave young Fred Trump the alternative to either quit and keep his license or continue, and he would be fired and would lose his license. And the reason for this was, of course, drinking, and perhaps, if not drinking literally on the job, it's drinking close enough to flight time to leave you under the influence. And you just can't have that, either on the highways and certainly not in aviation, particularly commercial aviation, which involves so many lives. Young Fred got the opportunity right after that to work for some small regional airlines, but those jobs were gone in 2, 3, 4 weeks each. And so there he was, back at Trump management. And Donald, by then, had returned from college, just a young, cocky guy, who was cut out for the rough and tumble world of real estate, not only in Queens, but ultimately in Manhattan. And Fred, beset by the aforementioned organic disorder that he had with anxiety and depression and alcoholism, just went down and down and down. And by his late 30s, he was essentially bedridden. And he was back home with his parents, which is, of course, rather ignominious at any age. And he lost more and more weight. And he ended up dying at 42. And it was sad. His daughter, Mary Trump, has written that his final trip to the hospital, he went alone because there he had been wasting away in his parents' home. And the parents simply didn't accompany him to the hospital. Donald was too busy to step in and try to help out. He was going to a movie. So Fred has died, and Donald now talks about him as a wonderful guy, which I'm sure he was in a lot of ways. But anyway, it's a sad story about Fred Trump Jr., the eldest son of the man who really made the Trump empire, and that's Fred Trump. So we've got Donald Trump calling it the China virus instead of the Trump virus, wearing a mask on his shoulder during a press conference. We've got federal stormtroops helping out local authorities, and very often without evident authority, just grabbing people off the street. So we've got to keep our eye on our freedom. We've known for a long time that Donald Trump is very much a threat to our freedom in this nation. And we can only pray, and I'm not religious, but I say that in a figurative sense, we can only pray that this man is defeated in the general election in November of 2020.